overarching changes to the governance and administration of the Maryland Environmental Service, including 1, altering the composition, selection, and standards of conduct for the Maryland Environmental Service, that's MES, Board of Directors. 2, adding new spending and contracting restrictions. 3, prohibiting the award of specified severance packages to former MES executives. 4, requiring the director to appoint a diversity officer. 5, instituting new training and required policies. 6, establishing new requirements and standards for holding board meetings. And 7, clarifying the application of specified collective bargaining provisions for MES employees. I did at some point, I think last week, send around a sort of spreadsheet that shows sort of a comparison of kind of the old or current law governance structure in statute and then what is proposed in the bill as amended by Budget and Tax. The Budget and Tax amendments appear on page 3 of your voting packet. They do a number of things. First, they make the bill an emergency measure. They rename the head of MES to be the executive director rather than just the director. They restore the executive director as a member of the board. The original bill had taken the director off of the board, but provide that he or she is a non-voting member. They add new criteria for the private sector members of the board. If you want to follow along, that's on page 33 of the voting packet. They establish term limits for the public sector and private sector members of the board. This is on page 35 of the voting packet. Note that there's actually a technical error in this, and I've confirmed with B&T. It should say paragraphs 3, Roman numeral I through Roman numeral 6. So that the term limits apply to all of the private sector members of the board. The amendments also require the executive director to provide an accounting of certain expenses at each regular meeting of the board. That's on page 35. They require the voting members of the board to conduct certain evaluations of the executive director, also on page 35. They increase the threshold for expenditures that required board approval from $25,000 to $200,000. That's on page 39. They add requirements regarding reports regarding the MES budget. That's page 40. They require MES to reasonably advertise, conduct a search, and conduct a competitive interview process for certain open positions. That's on page 41. They require the board to adopt a conflict of interest standard for board members. Page 42. They require the board to obtain an independent assessment of the board's operations every 5 years. That's page 46. They require an annual audit of MES accounts focusing on unauthorized spending and misallocated expenses. That's page 50. And finally, they make clarifying changes to the state personnel and pensions article to extend the application of Title III, which deals with collective bargaining, to employees of MES. That's on pages 52 through 56.
Now, I can't remember who from the committee sat in on those hearings. Did somebody sit in? Okay, Senator Lamb. Senator Lamb, you want to add anything? You've actually been pretty involved with this in terms of the investigations and hearings from the Joint Committee on Audits. Anything to add?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I did have a question as I was glancing through this. One of the things that the committee and it's actually the Joint Committee on Fair Practice and State Personnel Oversight that was hearing this. We have found that there were board members who, and it's not unique to this board, but I think the solution could be instructive, that there are board members whose terms have expired, but they're able to continue service on the board, right? And so there are these hanger-oners that continue on, and they kind of get into this loop where if no one has been appointed to take their place, they get to stay. But, I think it brings up a concern that, these folks can really overstay their term and also kind of circumvent the term limits in a way by doing this. And I'm not sure that the amendments here actually address that concern. I think they don't, actually. I don't know if, April, you can speak to that or not.
Let me take Senator Riley first, and we'll come back to April.
Yeah, Senator Lamb, great observation. We've done a fair amount of appointing to boards and commissions through our district. People in my district like to serve. The interesting thing is, when we are submitting names for like replacements, and the appointment secretary hasn't moved on them, he reminds us that someone is serving until replaced. And that's kind of the standard position according to Appointment Secretary Chris Cavey, that on the day your appointment ends doesn't automatically end your service. You serve until you're replaced. So I don't know if that answers your question, but Mr. Chairman, that's the kind of the standard answer we would get if we inquired, I think.
Right. I think the challenge, Senator, is if they automatically end and there are too many of those positions, you don't have a quorum. And how do you do business? So I think it's a bit of a challenge. Ms. Morton.
Right. I mean, and I don't have much to add. I think they were trying to address that through the amendments that say you can only serve 2 consecutive full 4-year terms plus any partial term, but served prior to that. So I think the intent there is to really restrict it, but there's not a whole lot that can be done legislatively beyond that to say that somebody who has already been appointed can't stay in that place until the new appointee is made.
Alternative is to have their term expire at the end of the term as designated. But I understand your point, Senator Riley, and I think that by tradition, this has been the general practice. I think the concern is that the right practice? And I think from our, and the investigation still continues, actually, it's not done yet, of MES, but is that the correct practice? And we saw that with UMS as well. There were the University of Maryland Medical System, that there were people that well extended beyond their time that they should have been on that board and used that to their advantage. And so I think it raises the question of whether or not that's actually the appropriate practice in general, as a practice for appointments to these boards or not. And it may not be specific to MES in this instance, but I think that was a recurring theme that we had come across when we had hearings on this in the interim.
And I think we all understand this came from the fiasco at MES, and that's an ongoing question, not just to this board, as you said. So unless there's an immediate answer, I mean, that can be revisited next year, for example. It doesn't mean we're punting on the issue. And again, if you have a solution, we can send it back with a solution or another amendment. But as it is now, I think our vote is to concur with the favorable as amended and send it back to Budget and Tax so they can proceed. Again, it doesn't. We're not. We don't have full authority, but if we have recommendation, we can send it back up there. That's my understanding.
We can adopt amendments.
I'm sorry?
We can do what we want. We can adopt amendments if we
Right.
want.
Before we go on, let's have a motion to concur with the bill as amended. Senator Riley, seconded. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just 2 points on the earlier discussion. I just want to associate myself with Senator Riley's remarks as far as the issue is bigger than this board. So I do think we have to handle that separately. Second of all, I'd like to commend Ms. Morton on the chart. I find this extremely helpful, the current law and then as amended. So first of all, I know that takes a work to do, so thank you for that. And my only question, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, on the 3rd page under audit requirements, as I'm reading this, I understand that current law, there was a current practice for MES to have the independent accountant do the audit. That was their routine. And either the bill or the amendments do, I'm not sure if it was the bill or the amendments, they basically strengthen the audit process to include unauthorized spending and reviewing the audit at a board meeting. And was that in the original bill or amendments? And am I reading that correctly?
Right, so this is, if you want to look, this is on page 50 of your voting packet in the reprint. So currently, there is a requirement in the current law that they get this annual audit, and that begins on page 49. This is in section 3-126. It's the bottom of page 39. The new language is on page 50 that says that either as a separate part of the audit already required, or as an individual audit, MES must obtain an audit that focuses on unauthorized spending, misallocated expenses, lack of conformity with state law or board policies, and other accounting errors, and that the board must review an audit prepared under this paragraph at a meeting of the board and make any changes or recommendations that the board considers appropriate based on the audit. So those were added through amendment in budget and tax.
The strengthening of the audit was added in budget and tax as an amendment.
Correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing no red lights on. Will anybody be objecting to this legislation? Seeing none, please send up our recommendation as unanimous back to budget and tax so it can be moved to the floor. Thank you. Next bill.
Senate Bill 119, Clean Water Commerce Act of 2021. This bill reauthorizes and modifies the Clean Water Commerce Act through June 30th, 2030, and requires the Maryland Department of the Environment to transfer $20 million annually from the Bay Restoration Fund wastewater account to the Clean Water Commerce Fund, a new special fund established by the bill. The fund must be used to purchase environmental outcomes to help the state achieve the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load. The bill establishes requirements for the provision and verification of environmental outcomes, among other things. There are amendments on page 57 of your voting packet from Senator Gazzone. The amendments add a representative from the environmental justice community to the Bay Restoration Fund Advisory Committee. That's on page 72 of the packet. Focus environmental outcomes that may be purchased under the bill on nitrogen reductions, phosphorus and sediment reductions would be treated as co-benefits. That's on page 73. Include afforestation and reforestation in the definition of non-agricultural landscape restoration practices. That's on page 73. For the agricultural set-aside, make fixed natural filters and ditch management projects the priority. That's on page 74. For the environmental justice set-aside, specifically mention stormwater and green infrastructure projects as eligible. That's page 75. For the non-agricultural set-aside, specifically mentions consideration of upstream conditions. That's on page 75. Require all projects to have an expected beneficial life of 10 years. That's on page 73. Allow for projects to include components from all three set-asides. In other words, they allow blending. That's on page 75. Change the information to be included with each proposal, such as details on co-benefits and outstanding funding. That's on page 77. Expand co-benefits to include climate mitigation, page 78. Encourage third-party and non-public funding to achieve project goals. That's on page 77. Allow the department to use existing registries for public notice. That's on page 80. And finally, require evaluation of set-aside percentages as part of a 2025 annual report. That's on page 82.
Okay, while we took this up last Friday, and then it was held at the last moment, let's do the same thing. Let's have a motion to concur with the bill as amended to send back up the budget and tax. Can I entertain a motion? It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Okay. The floor is open. Let me just say this. This was done from the commission, which is a nonpartisan or bipartisan group. And I have to say personally, they do some of the best data collection in terms of investment strategies, processes. For those who've been here a while, Ann Swanson and their staff come in here, I think are very objective and very scientifically based. So regardless of the amendments and the bill itself, it was generated by them to conform the TMDL requirement, which we must do by 2025. So that's just some context. Discussion, Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very, the goals of the bill is lofty. And I was reading through the fiscal note, and it's, MDE says that the diversion of funds from the clean water, I think from the other fund to this fund, would cause certain projects that are on the way to not be funded. And I'm concerned about what projects will not be funded. And I searched, I did see a list of what projects will lose funding. I don't know if you or council receive any kind of list of projects that will be defunded because of the transfer of the $20 million annually.
Quickly, and I think I missed it in this overview of the amendments. The amendments do change it from it's no longer a separate special fund. It would be a new account within the existing Bay Restoration Fund. Mm-hmm. But you are right. It is essentially fencing off $20 million that's currently in the wastewater account to be used for the purposes of the Clean Water Commerce Act projects or eligible projects, and there are a number of other kind of demands on that money, and I can't say with any certainty which specific projects wouldn't get funded as a result, but we do have folks from the Bay Commission on who might be able to talk a little bit more to how that funding might otherwise be spent.
Yeah, thank you. But I would love to hear directly from MD because according to the fiscal note, it's their analysis. They're the manager of the fund. And so, I hate to put a vote in that would say take money away from a project, especially in my district, inadvertently not knowing about it. I would personally really love to know what projects will not be funded in order to fund this. Because that money is used for like wastewater treatment facilities. It's used for septic remediation. And so, if a project is being funded that will, because of this bill, stop those projects, then I'm really concerned about that.
To clarify, the money, the $20 million only gets sort of diverted to this account after all of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, all of the funding towards that has happened. So this is money that happens, it's after the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So it won't affect those projects. It won't affect most septics projects either because those come from a different account. Those come from the septics account in the Bay Restoration Fund. This is just dealing with the wastewater account. The biggest concern that I have, or the other potential projects that are sort of eligible for funding under this wastewater account are primarily stormwater and non-point source, sort of other nutrient kind of runoff related projects. There is, I think, some other septic stuff in there too. Right. But
okay, so on page 5 of the fiscal note, it says impact on the Bay Restoration Fund and the Clean Water Commerce Act. It says, last paragraph, although the bill does not have an overall effect of MDE's special fund finances, by redirecting $20 million annually from the BRF to the CWCF, the bill changes the type of projects that will receive funding. Additionally, MDE advised that because it already has plans to spend the available BRF funding on capital projects, the bill could impact or delay those projects due to the required redirection of funding. And so that's that area I'm really concerned about, that we need to know what will not be funded so that, at least me personally, can cast a vote that's not detrimental to my district, at least.
Well, is someone from the commission on?
Yes.
Okay, hold 1 second, Ann. Two things, just so we're clear. What the committee council said about wastewater treatment plants, this will not affect that. That money is set aside. And the other thing I just want to mention is that every year there are hundreds of applications for projects, and not all of them ever get funded. Ms. Swanson.
Yeah, so a few points here. One is that the money in the BRF has always been designed to be cost effective. So if there are projects that are in the pipeline that are very cost effective, they, in this bill, would continue to be funded because they would be very competitive. If for some reason there is a project that is not cost effective, then there are a couple of ways that this bill could still accommodate it. One is if it's in an underserved community that has $4 million of these dollars designated for it, it might actually be more competitive than before because it's in a set-aside category. The other thing to remember is that that doesn't mean that those projects will be permanently derailed. What it may mean is that their implementation might be delayed just because there are other projects that are much more cost effective. This program is designed to allow MDE to really manage those accounts, to be able to really pick and choose the projects that will be most cost effective to deliver Maryland to its 2025 obligations.
Okay, I understand what you said, and I heard the word may and possibly, and I can't cast a vote, responsible vote, and no disrespect, ma'am. I need to know from MD what projects will be delayed or put off or will be funded. I mean, they made a statement, and so I need to know directly from them, or else I will just, abstain from this vote, because I can't cast a responsible vote not knowing if my favorite project will be defunded or put off or whatever. And I hate to put it that way, but,
Okay, hold it, Ann, hold it. Again, that's fine.
No, thank you, Mr.
You have
Chairman.
your vote however you want to vote. Yeah. But each year, MDE judges the projects, the cost and the return on investment in terms of reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus. So if you were to ask that any year, they say we can't tell you until we evaluate all the projects and all the applications that come in. So, take that for what it is. But I knew that's what they're going to tell you because I saw the list of, I think, 2019 or 2020, and there were 30, 40, 50 projects that were on the list and they chose not to do. Yeah. So each year, that's a moving target. That's it.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, but in this fiscal note, it says specifically, MDE advises that because it has plans to spend the available PR funding on capital projects. It says it has plans. That's definitive. So I would like to know, can we get from them what plans they have that will not be funded? I mean, it's specific right here. I'm not sure where this commission.
It's MDE, and they lose authority and control over certain things, so they're going to word the fiscal note as they choose to word the fiscal note. Okay, let's go. I think I had Senator Fry Hester, followed by Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to remind the committee that about 3 weeks ago, Senator Gallion and I had a conversation with MDE and Robin Clark from CBF and Ian, where we talked through where this money, it was really confusing, but where it could come and what might and might not be funded. I then sent the email to committee staff, and I can send it to you as well. So we do have some of those answers. I'm not sure I can articulate everything because it's really complicated, but I'm happy to send that to you. And That said, I mean, I do appreciate, I'm in full support of this bill, and Senator Gazzoni said something which maybe council can help to clarify about the disadvantaged communities. I'd just like to understand that a little bit better.
Ladies and gentlemen, apparently the mics are not as sensitive, so you really have to lean in and speak so it can all be picked up for the streaming.
So the bill has certain kind of set-asides for projects in different categories. And one of those projects is, it says on page, I believe, 74 going into 75 of the bill, or of the voting packet, at least 20% must be used to procure environmental outcomes from projects, including stormwater management and green infrastructure projects, established in communities disproportionately burdened by environmental harms and risks as identified by the department in consultation with the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. So that's a kind of a set-aside within this larger set-aside that is meant specifically to go to environmental justice communities.
Senator Patterson.
I just have a follow-up question for April. You made reference to storm water management runoff. Is it likely that we're going to see some increase in, I think of several counties that's already paying a healthy fee for stormwater runoff. Will this impact those counties at all in terms of fees?
Senator, should I have Ann?
I mean, maybe Ann.
Ms. Swanson, did you hear the question?
Yeah, can you repeat it? It's very difficult to hear.
Yes. My question was that we're talking a bit about stormwater runoff, and I made reference to the fact that my county, along with several others, are already taxed quite a bit for stormwater runoff per household. And I was curious to know if this document would anyway have some bearing upon whether or not there might be some shift in costs for those who are already paying quite a bit for stormwater runoff.
So can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So this bill does a couple of things. The first is it sets aside 20%, as April described, for underserved. Many of those communities may have significant stormwater runoff issues. So within that category, if there was a project that was proposed that was a very cost-effective project, it could be selected by MDE. The other area where stormwater could definitely be covered is in the unallotted portion. There's 35% of the money that's unallotted. And so that money, really any competitive project, whether a local jurisdiction has a stormwater fee or not, could compete in that category. If the stormwater project was a landscape restoration related thing, something dealing with green infrastructure, then there's a possibility that it could even compete in the third set aside category, which is that landscape restoration part. So there's a number of ways that a stormwater project could be funded, but again, the principal lens is it a cost-effective project? Does that help?
Well, somewhat, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
More directly, this does not change
What we're doing.
it doesn't change any taxes or fees for anybody.
No, it changes
Okay.
nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. Part of my original question, I think, was answered because I was going to ask, are all projects automatically funded? Because there's a concern that somehow if we take money out, that the project that's the 105th project somehow would it
wouldn't be funded. So it's the case that not all projects that are submitted are funded. So that's correct?
That's correct, and that's true of the current Clean Water Commerce Act as well.
Yes.
In that if a project is submitted that is not considered to be cost effective, then it would not be funded. In this new bill, there's even a tighter focus on projects that are primarily focused on nitrogen reductions.
Right. So is this bill, this is, again, questions. These are
Senator Washington, lean in even closer or
Okay.
pull the mic down a little bit.
Okay, so this is, again, I'm trying to understand the fund a little more, this 35%
Yep.
unallocated, and the concern around the 20 million. So is it the case that to date, has there ever been a time that there were funds that have been unexpended because there were not projects that met the criteria to be funded?
So in the first year of the Clean Water Commerce Act, they actually did not fund any of them. And that was primarily because they were ramping up. But once the program was ramped up, they did spend the money that was in the fund. At this point now, at least based on the committee work we did in advance of this session, they felt that there would be more than ample competitive proposals.
Okay.
And then what we did was we very specifically tried to focus the bill on those areas, those sectors where we felt either there was the greatest opportunity for reductions or just a unaddressed need, like in the underserved communities.
So the 20 million is creating a new separate fund under this bill, correct? Is that what we're doing?
MDE, in order to maximize flexibility in terms of cash flow, they asked us to please categorize it as an account, create it as an account, and not a separate fund. That would allow them greater flexibility in cash management. And so this bill does create an account for this $20 million so that MDE can maximize the management of those projects, because some of the projects that they select are intended to have they're intended to be long projects, 10 years.
Right. So I think that this is very helpful, Chairman, because the way that we're discussing it is somehow that we're transferring 20 million out of the Bay Restoration Fund into some separate fund, which is kind of how the discourse is. But you're saying that it's still part of the Bay Restoration Fund, right?
Absolutely.
And that for administrative and technical services, in order to expand the eligible projects, you're creating a special fund underneath the Bay Restoration Fund to specifically target these things.
And so what this particular bill is doing is it's really maximizing the General Assembly's voice in strategically procuring practices that will deliver nutrient reductions, yes. And it's also, the other thing it's doing is, initially, most of the money used in the Bay Restoration Fund was targeted very successfully at waste treatment plants, cover crops, and septic systems. And what this is now doing is expanding it to purchase some of the remaining low-hanging fruit, if you will, for nutrient reductions.
That's very helpful, because I think that allays some concerns, at least on my end, that this is somehow being transferred into some pet project fund. What it's actually, again, expanding for some more projects that achieve the final goal. And then my final question, Mr. Chairman, is just to understand the 35% unallotted. What is that exactly?
Yeah. Okay. So what it is, think about the money in 4 buckets. So the first bucket takes 35%.
Once it's in the fund, once it's shifted to the clean water.
So once it's into this new account, because again, it's not a new fund, which I think is really helpful.
I just wanted her breakdown
Great.
to be understood that it's once it's moved into the fund.
Great, thank you. So once it's moved to the account, All right, so,
Dan, continue.
yeah.
Okay, so then think about, in this account, there are 4 targeted buckets. Okay, well, first one is agriculture. Very specific, targeted agricultural reductions favoring long-term practices, 10-year, that have beneficial life of 10 years. The second one is underserved communities. That takes 20%, so $4 million. The third is landscape restoration. In the watershed implementation plans, things that are of very high value are, for example, stream restorations or long natural landscape restoration projects. So this directs $2 million for that. After those set-asides, the remaining set-aside is general. It allows anybody to compete with any kind of a good idea. So it could be in agriculture, it could be in stormwater, it could be in wastewater, it could be in any category. And that way, that also favors innovation, for example, and it could end up being an additional underserved community project or an additional agricultural project. It could be anything, and it allows MDE to have that kind of flexibility.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for that. I think that clears up a lot of the concerns I had. Thank you.
Thank you. So before us is to concur with the bill as amended and forward that, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Simon Air.
I know it's hard to see over here. Just a couple quick questions. This is a special fund from the flush fee, is that?
So yes. So this is from the flush fee, but again, it's the original bill created a new fund. Now it's an account within.
I mean, what's coming in is from the flush fee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then how much annually do we get in that fund? I mean, we're taking 20 million out. Is it out of 500 million or is it out of 40 million?
I want to say 60, but I don't know. Ann, do you know where Ms. Morton is looking?
It is. It's about 60 well, here's the thing is the overall BRF produces more money. What apparently there is after all of the obligations that are already committed, MDE told us that there was about $60 million that was available for these kinds of projects, because we were looking into that when we were considering not only the BRF, but also other bills that have been before this committee that are looking at BRF funding. So we, both MDE and DNR participated in our work group, and we needed to be sure that there was sufficient funds, and that's where we started. And the indication was, yes, there are, because there's about 60, I think it was about 60 or $62 million, and this takes 20. But again, it's not taking it from the BRF, it's strategically directing how that money is used.
Not arguing for or against the bill. So if I understand your math, it started with 60, and this is going to take 20 million out, so that leaves 40, and the climate solution took 15 out, so that leaves us with 25 million. So that's less than half of what we had last year to compete for the capital projects. But my other question, just when you started talking, you said it was for ag and social justice and landscape, and the rest was for general that anybody could apply for. Why did we fence that off if anybody can apply for it? Is there special requirements if anybody can apply for it that they wouldn't normally? So this year they're able to apply for a project.
Yes.
After this goes into law, there'll be the unallotted money that you said anybody could apply for. So do they have different standards as far as what they can apply for than they could last year? And if it's not different, why are we fencing that money off?
No, so the difference difference is that if you're talking specifically about the Clean Water Commerce Act, in the past, when the department, originally the Hogan administration proposed the Clean Water Commerce Act, and that was for $10 million. And that was really to be it was a competitive procurement act. And in general, what we saw going into it was that for the most part, it was the waste treatment plants that could compete in terms of cost effectiveness for those proposals. And MDE actually indicated that they would prefer this to be expanded to other sectors. They actually put in a bill that limited the waste treatment plants to 10%. In this bill, waste treatment plants could actually compete for more than just 10% of the total dollars.
I'm just trying to find out what the difference is. By setting this unallocated, the way we're doing this bill, does that allow that money to be used for these other three categories that they couldn't have in the past? Because
no, they could have competed in the past. But for example, let's take underserved communities. In general, stormwater are extremely expensive practices. So even if they did compete, they might not have been able to compete against a waste treatment plant, which was providing a lower cost per pound reduction and also maybe more pounds. So this allows now, for example, those underserved communities to compete within their own category. It still chooses the most cost-effective practices, but it at least allows them a fair shot at controlling some of the pollution in those locations.
In response, I think what you're asking is why you're asking about the things that are not going to those set-asides, why even bring them under this Clean Water Commerce. And the idea more broadly of the Clean Water Commerce Act is to award funding on a competitive basis. So there are other provisions that would still apply to projects that are applying for this funding that would really require the department to ensure that money from this account is going to projects that sort of yield the best bang for the buck in terms of going to projects that have a lifespan of at least 15 years, that are resulting in nitrogen pollutions. They're going to be looking at, are there co-benefits that come from it? But ultimately, the question that, that comes for money being awarded out of this account is it's the purchase of environmental outcomes. So it's making sure that you're getting the biggest nitrogen reduction for the state dollars.
And that's currently not taking place with their awards, and that's why we're putting it in here?
This has more specific guidance in it, I would say. And it's building off of, though, the existing Clean Water, there is an existing Clean Water Commerce Act that requires the department to be using, or that authorizes the department to be using money from the Bay Restoration Fund for the purchase of environmental outcomes. But yeah, so more specifics in terms of what they're looking for with the money that's set aside in this account.
Senator Ellis, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking here, I'm thinking about the math, $20 million per year, almost 10 years, that's around $200 million. So a lot of money, and I mean, being new to the Senate, I've been informed, and I agree, when we produce a quality product from the committee, I want to stand with my committee on the floor, and I want to really support this. But it's put me in a bad position not having some of the key facts with this. And so could we put off the vote on this and get the data on what projects MD definitively say they have in the plans? You're shaking your head no. because I'm really concerned about this. I mean, I will kind of bring it up on the floor, and I just feel that I just cannot cast a vote that is built on, maybes, and when the department says definitively this will take money away from some projects. I just spoke with a colleague today on the floor, and he/she mentioned that several millions were taken from projects in their county without them knowing. I just got to know this before I can vote, and just kind of not bring this up on the floor. And something I think all my colleagues should know. Where will this hurt? And so I would just love to get that data from MDE, and I don't know why this train must leave the station right now.
Okay,
But
Senator,
I think it's important, from my opinion,
Okay.
from trying to be a sound fiscal guy here, to say this will impact projects. We need to understand, at least I need to understand it, to cast an intelligent vote and support my committee when it comes to this issue on the floor. So I'm just asking
Senator,
to get that data, if you can try to get that data.
You can vote no or abstain. We have a one-hold policy. And, there's not a definitive list because the list changes every year. Sometimes your county gets projects funded, sometimes they don't. Each year, MDE compares them in terms of how much nitrogen or phosphorus reduction they get for the investment. And I hate to talk about the greater good, but one of the reasons we're required to do this is we have to clean up the bay, or recreational people who go boating on the bay from your county or my county or Montgomery County, or people who make their living on the bay, the watermen and women, and other tourism won't be there. So part of the reason for this is to try to address the greater good, which the federal government is actually driving the train, and we're moving ahead. Some other states aren't even moving as quickly. But to help the streams and rivers that go through all of our jurisdictions and empty into the bay, we're contributing to this. And so I hate to say, we should put aside our local concerns of projects for the greater good, but there's not any static list of projects. There just isn't. For the first 5 or 10 years, the money went to 3 or 4 major wastewater treatment plants, either rebuilding or renovating, because they're pretty goddamn expensive, like tens of millions of dollars. They got through that list, which was very expensive. It took, I don't know how many years. Then they went to the smaller wastewater treatment plants in various jurisdictions. And then over the years, we've actually added other categories. So it's not been a static list. It's not been a static expenditure areas. It's moved in both counts. I mean, that's, I can only tell you that I looked on page 10 of the bill. It says when evaluating proposals, the department, so MDE is actually evaluating these proposals. It's not being some secretive group. They have to look at dollar cost per unit of environmental outcome. What that means, for every dollar invested, how much nitrogen and phosphorus gets reduced. And the cheaper ones get at the top of the list, the more expensive ones that don't pay for themselves go further on the list. And then the second criteria or is expected co-benefits, and there are 3 of them. Resiliency to the anticipated adverse effects because of climate change, addressing diversity, equity, environmental justice, and contributing toward the attainment of water quality standards in locally impaired watersheds. So it wants to drill down into those watersheds that are hurt even more. So, Senator, I just don't know if we're going to get the answer you want, and obviously we're all free to vote, and we're second on this. They spent some time upstairs. So, Senator Hester.
Mr. Chairman, this is my second year on the committee, so I'm trying to make sure I've got the one hold, one member thing right.
One hold per bill.
One hold per bill.
Correct.
Okay. I just know that this bill is incredibly important, and to myself and to my colleagues from Howard County. So I was going to request a hold. I thought it was one member, one.
If that were the case, we'd have 11 holds, and,
Right,
and
okay.
bills could be here May 1st. So it was, that has been the policy for the last few years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, roll call on, and I apologize, I said we're second. We're first, Budget and Taxes second, so I misspoke there. Roll call on the bill as amended.
Okay. Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Lamb?
Yes.
Senator Hester?
Yes.
Senator Ellis? Senator Gallion?
I brought this up on the bill the other day. I share my colleagues' concerns about some of these projects, but overall, I think it's good policy, this bill. So I'm kind of conflicted on it. So I'm going to be searching for more information on these projects that potentially could get funded. But at this time, because I think it's good policy, I'll be voting yes.
Senator Carozza?
Yes.
Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Riley?
Yes.
Senator Patterson? Yes. Senator Simonaire?
Yes.
Senator Penske?
Yes.
801. I'm sorry. 1001. I'm sorry.
Okay, the vote is 10 in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention. This will be brought over to Budget and Tax, and they will have their look at it. Okay, thank you, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next
very
bill.
much. Have a nice night.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Next bill.
Senate Bill 150, Baltimore County Board of Education, Election of Officers. This bill alters the number of votes required for the Baltimore County Board of Education to elect a chair and a vice chair by requiring a majority vote of the voting members currently serving instead of a majority vote of the total number of board positions. There is one amendment. That's on page 85 of your packet, and that's from Senator Sidnor. And this amendment increases the number of appointed members of the board from 4 to 5. It requires the Baltimore County Executive to appoint the new appointed member from a list of nominees submitted by the Baltimore County School Board Nominating Commission, and candidates who file for an elected position on the board may not be appointed to the board. There was no opposition, and we have a local letter.
Let's get it on the floor first. Did I hear Senator Patterson? A motion moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, will anybody be voting against this local bill? Seeing none, it's unanimous. Next bill.
This is Senate Bill 283, the Student and Military Voter Empowerment Act. This bill establishes various requirements relating primarily to voter registration and voting by military and overseas voters and students at institutions of higher education in the state. These include a process for a military or overseas voter to submit a federal postcard application electronically, 2, a designation of a student voting coordinator and development and implementation of a student voting plan at each public institution of higher education, the expansion of the placement of links to the State Board of Elections online registration system on online portals used by higher education students to register for coursework, and 4, a specified State Board of Elections webpage relating to registration and voting by students enrolled in these institutions. The bill also requires that local boards of elections obtain input from large residential institutional communities when establishing precinct boundaries and designating polling places. The bill takes effect on June 1st, 2021. There's various reporting requirements. There is one amendment from Senator Penske, and that's on page 91 of your packet. And this amendment removes a provision requiring a specified student voting plan to have a policy allowing a student an excused absence from class or a job with the institution for the purpose of voting. There was minimal opposition at the hearing.
Okay, let's get the bill on the floor. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I understand your amendment, it eliminates the 2 hours excused for voting, correct? Okay, and I see we have the Maryland Board of Elections here, Director Damaris. I do have a question, and it's mainly any feedback on the other provisions of the bill, if there has been some feedback on what that means for local Board of Elections. I know as I recall from the hearing, we primarily focused, we talked about the issue of the excused absence, and that took a great deal of the hearing, but we did not talk in detail about the other provisions and what that impact might have on our local boards of election.
Well, as I review the witness list, none of the higher education institutions opposed it. Some favored it and some were just silent.
No. It wasn't. I was trying to understand the local, if there was an impact with the local boards of election with the legislation. And
Ms.
that's
Goodman, could you tell us what impacts this bill will have on the local boards?
So essentially, the only requirement for a local board in this bill is that they have to consult with these communities. What do they call them here? These large residential institutional communities before establishing precinct boundaries. So it doesn't require them to establish precincts at them, but just to consult with them when they're establishing those boundaries.
Okay, so it doesn't limit their authority at all, and we're encouraging the coordination and communication with these either installations or institutions of higher education. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question either for Ms. Goodman or we can't see on this side, but I understand, is Mr. Damaris on the video? He is. Okay, we don't get to see his fancy coiffure today. I am looking at page 8, also on lines. Sorry, I keep going back and forth. On lines 12 through 15. And again, either for Mr. Damaris or for Ms. Goodman, it says that there shall be reasonable accommodation and collaboration with the local board of elections regarding the placement of an early voting center or precinct polling place on campus if requested by the local board. And I just wonder, so first off, in following Senator Carrozza's question, I think that is another involvement of local boards, but I just wonder whether that has any force in law. Does that mean anything? What does reasonable accommodation and collaboration actually mean when these decisions are being made?
So this is what you're looking at here is the student voting coordinator shall develop and implement the voting plan. This is the lead-in language to increase their registration and voting collaboration. So the student voting plan shall, and then it comes up to, let me make sure we're getting here.
Shall include.
1, 2, 3.
On line 24,
Right.
page
And reasonable
7.
accommodation and collaboration with the, so if a local board approaches the institution of higher education and says, we would like to locate an early voting center here or a precinct polling place on campus, then the voting plan has to include what type of accommodations and collaborations with the local board that the institution would do. So this isn't a requirement on the local board, but more on the institution. How are they going to help the local board if they come to them and say, hey, we want to locate something here, can you help us out?
Yep, and I'm just wondering, but bottom line, it's, can you guys play nicely together?
I'm assuming that's what reasonable accommodation would mean.
Okay, it seems a little odd to put that into a law. It doesn't actually do anything. I don't think it is particularly harmful, but I think it strikes me as a little bit odd.
So let me just ask a question. If we put, if selected or proposed by the local board, would that make it clearer?
It says if requested by the local board. So in this particular case, we're asking the institution to be reasonable if they're approached by the local board to accommodate this request. I think this is actually fairly standard language.
Accommodations are also, I'm sorry, Chair, if you don't mind.
No, Mr. Demarinis.
Oh, sorry. Usually, some of the schools do not like campaign signs on the campus, and some of them also require that you have to have IDs to be on campus. So these are all accommodations that if a local board requests an early voting center or a precinct be placed on the campus, they have to allow other activities on campus and to allow people normally not allowed on campus to walk on the campus to vote, because the polling place might be bigger than the actual student body, especially if it's an early voting center.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Demarinis. So one of the many reasons that we've killed the legislation that was similar to this but different last year was because there was a mandate that there be a polling place on every college campus, whether or not that was warranted. And we had just declined to do that when it came to senior living centers, because again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So I appreciate that the sponsors modified the bill to make this more collaborative, but the examples you gave, Mr. Demarinis, seem worthy of actually putting in here. Would you know whether that was considered? Because I think the two examples you gave.
I mean, if you want to put that as amendments into the bill, that's within your prerogative. I guess the reasonable accommodations, I was just kind of going to that phrase, and that's the accommodations that we're kind of seeking on that by the local boards when we go into and request.
So the most obvious.
There.
I'm sorry. So the most obvious accommodation is help us figure out a space that's going to be large enough, whether that's a gymnasium or a multi-purpose room or wherever there is, so that, and there will need to be signage and parking, and I mean, there's kind of all that obvious stuff. But you just brought up IDs for visitors coming onto the campus. You talked about campaign signs, and there would also be voting signs so that people coming from a neighborhood would be able to navigate their way to the right building, to the right voting center. I think there's some wisdom in adding some of that specificity rather than play nicely together in the sandbox.
Well, let me just reiterate that starting from the first point on page 3, the local board can obtain input from the institutions. So the institutions might actually say, because of those problems, it shouldn't be on campus. And most of the smaller, medium-sized don't have early voting on campus. I guess there are a couple that do. I mean, obviously, we're open to amendments. I think it's covered, but feel free. I mean, if we want to be clear on what we're doing. Senator Carrozza.
If we're going to go into amendments that affect both the institutions of higher education and the local board of elections, I would want to know their input instead of us just kind of, coming up with amendments in this voting session. So that's where I am, because it's taken a while to get to this point with the bill, and I think we want to be fair to all parties involved. Obviously. Our students, our veterans, the institutions of higher learning that are affected, the local boards of elections. So, if we're going to now try to wordsmith some, specifics, I would want to go back to the other parties involved for their input. So that's where I am with this bill right now.
Madam Vice Chair.
Colleagues, I support the bill, I support the concept, and I like this bill so much better, and I really commend Senator Elfreth for her work on this over the interim. I think a little bit more specificity would make the bill better, but I also, if I am alone in that, I'm happy to defer and we can move forward. I'm reading body language, and I'm seeing I was seeing nods and all that. So is it worth, again, Senator Crows, I heard what you said, but I'm looking for something really modest. Reasonable accommodations in collaboration with the board, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think maybe we could list regarding, and I'm not a bill drafter, but regarding space for voting, parking, signage, access to the campus. I mean, I think they're just basic things that I think Jared and the rest of us could come up with. I don't think it's creating large new policies. And we can check with the sponsor, we could check with others to the degree that you'd want to.
So-
Mr. Demarinis, is this complicated? Do you think it's sufficient as is, or is adding some specificity helpful?
Well, I mean, it's a part of the student plan, so I guess, it's more for the making sure what is going to be included in the student plan. I allow your prerogative on whether to make it specific or not. I think those are the kind of the ideas for what reasonable accommodations would be needed for polling places on campuses to make sure that those issues are addressed in the plan.
Senator Washington.
Let's go.
But I'd be happy to work with Stacy or with anyone on drafting amendments if that's the desire.
Let me go to Senator Gallion, then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to step on your toes with the amendment. Are we done for now with the possible amendment? We can talk on the bill? Okay.
That's an open question. We haven't adopted my amendment yet either, so.
Right. There's
Senator, if it is on a separate topic, Senator Washington, do you want to stay?
I think that the Vice Chair is right in that if you're dealing with institutions that are not accustomed to dealing with voting practices, their interpretation of a reasonable accommodation, they might not come to the same conclusion that a Board of Elections would. And so we would pass the bill, and then we are back next year because people would say the plan didn't include X, Y, and Z. So not an extensive rewrite, not at all, but I could see the value in some specificity around, what a reasonable accommodation is. And then just, if I may, just to the need for the bill, there appears to be sort of, my other job is as a professor. I've been in institutions, at least for 20 years or so, and there is a tendency for that town gown divide of the institutions creating a wall culturally and engagement wide around themselves, and so they don't engage in the local politics and the local, and that's been changing. That's been changing over the last 10 years. So this bill is actually part of that. More universities are saying we need to be a part of the community. And there seems to be a disparity between the private institutions. A lot of the private institutions are doing this and moving forward. But our students on our public institution, our public campuses, and our community colleges, their institutions are a little slower to move forward on this. And so there's this kind of disparity that we can help resolve for our voting students on our public campuses compared to our voting students on some of our private campuses. So.
Hear from Senator Gallion and adopt my amendment. I'm going to consider it a hold, and then we'll come back to it, and you'll either come back with language that the committee likes or not. That's all. Senator Gallion.
So there's parts of the bill I like, but I was just looking at the fiscal note talking about designation of a student voting coordinator and development and implementation of a student voting plan at each public institution of higher education. I have two millennials that work in the office staff there, and I can tell you these young folks, they're pretty good at finding stuff out and figuring stuff out. I don't see why it's necessary to have these like a coordinator in this plan and all. I mean, we got these young folks in college. I'm sure they can figure out how to get registered and go vote. I just don't really see the real need for that. But I do like the parts with the military voting, and also you said you are gonna do a hold on this. Okay, that'll give me time to work on amendments.
Okay,
Thank you.
And let me point out, Senator, this came up either last year or the year before, and I believe the sponsor, maybe 2 years ago, called for hiring a coordinator. But the language was changed to say designate someone. So I think the understanding is they'll designate another staff member, either a student, someone in the student vice president's office or whatever, to do this. So, we can't always go by the physical note because sometimes they get inflated. But I think, and I have the page 2 of the physical note, it says they designate a staff member as a student voting coordinator. So I agree with you. A lot of people can get things done without it being a cost. So obviously you're open to coming up with language and other amendments as well on that or anything else.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's, yeah, I was going to move my amendment.
Okay, go ahead.
Look, the amendment of saying people don't get a break from class when they have 8 days of early voting. Is there a second? Second. Any objection? Okay, that amendment's adopted. Senator Simon.
Yeah, I think I missed this testimony on here, but elections do get political. I'm just letting you know that. So I was just curious how they're going to determine this one person that's going to develop the plan and implement it and ensure that it's a bipartisan effort on the implementation, and why we just selected one person opposed to two to kind of balance.
Well, first of all, the local board of elections has the final authority and word on any of this.
As far as who they designate?
No, in terms of what the rules of the road are, just like they decide voting locations and distance from voting and things like that. The school is called to assign a voting coordinator to encourage more people to vote and make sure it's on the website and things like that. I don't think this coordinator has sole unitary or unilateral decision on this, but
yeah, I mean, I'm just a little concerned with the language where it says they just don't develop a plan, which you can put out there, but they are actually a staff member. The student voting coordinator shall develop and implement it, and then they're the ones out there where they put things and how they do it. So I'm just concerned because of the political nature of this, that I think potential amendment, and we can discuss that, maybe to have two people and how we select them. I think that'd be fair.
look, it's going to be open to amendments when we take it back up again, which may be Friday, maybe early next week. So it's on hold. Next bill.
Senate Bill 324, Environment and Natural Resources, Complaints, Inspections, and Enforcement, Information, Maintenance, and Reporting. There was an amendment in your packet, but the Senator has recently provided an updated amendment, which should be on your desk separately. So this is amendment number 333826/1. No, sorry, that's the old one. I don't have a copy of the new one.
663922.
Yes. Can I borrow that for a second? Get back. Sorry, so it's amendment number 663922/1. This amendment limits the application of the, I'll start with the overview of the bill. Senate Bill 324 establishes various tracking and reporting requirements for the Maryland Department of the Environment and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources with respect to the enforcement of environment and natural resources laws. Among other things, the Maryland Department of the Environment must maintain specified complaint data and develop and maintain a website with specified information and data relating to the enforcement of environmental laws. And two, DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, must submit an annual report with specified data regarding the enforcement of natural resources and conservation laws. So the amendment being offered by Senator Elfreth, first it limits the application of the environmental portion of the bill to the following programs tracked through the department's environmental tracking system or a comparable database. 1, beginning October 1st, 2021, water quality programs within the department's Water and Science Administration, and 2, beginning June 30th, 2022, water quality programs within the department's Land and Materials Administration, and air quality programs within the department's Air and Radiation Administration. So that's all on page 2 of the reprint, which is behind the copy of the actual bill. The amendments also change references to suspected violations and instead refer to alleged violations throughout the bill. Amendments strike language requiring the department to post information on proposed legal settlements and instead requires the department to post information on finalized legal settlements and adds information that must be included. That's on page 3 of the reprint. Amendments strike language referencing, quote, any other elevated status of concern and provisions requiring the department to create a list of violations that the department has deemed significant noncompliance or a high priority violation. That's on page 4. And it makes other conforming and clarifying changes throughout.
Okay, let's put it on the floor in front of us. Is there a motion in support of the bill? It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second? Second. Seconded. Okay. The bill is before you.
Sure.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's move and adopt the amendment so we have the bills amended before us.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any objection to the amendments? Sure.
Not a one-word amendment. I'm trying to grasp it.
I think it was done in response to some of the criticism. I think it's softened. I hate to use the word softens the bill, but I think it mollifies some of the bill. But
That's fine.
We don't have to adopt them. Please proceed.
I just want to understand them. So I see suspected went to alleged and so forth. So is the alleged violations just going to be kept at the department and not at the view of the public, or is that with the amended, or is that still going to be accessible to the public?
Two pieces. So both as it came in and as amended, and I'd say largely the amendments are clarifying and are responding to concerns of Department of the Environment, just in terms of what is feasible for them. But subsection C, so on page 2 of the reprint, that's an internal tracking of complaints by the Department of the Environment. There is, however, on subsection E1, which is on page 3, beginning on line 9 and 11. So the department does have to put on the website a list of complaints with specified data, but it does not include, it specifically does not include identification of the facility. So it's, the information is the date on which the complaint was submitted, the county in which the alleged violation occurred, which administration within the department is authorized to enforce the alleged violation, any complaint or case identification number, and if a complaint has been closed, the date on which the complaint was closed. The advocates for the bill want this information, particularly that identification number, because they want, you know, if you've made a complaint to the department and then you just want to know what the status of it is, have they followed up on it? They want to have some way for people to sort of follow up on that. But it specifically does not include the name of the facility.
Case number, say it's 115. Would the public be able to correlate that case number to specific information?
If you were the one who made the complaint, certainly. But otherwise, no.
So the public would not have they wouldn't have access to a case number. They couldn't do a PIA or anything like that.
I mean, I don't know what would be discoverable under a PAA using that case number. I mean, again, what they would see on the website would be the date, the county, the administration, the case number, and whether or not the complaint would be closed. So that's the only information that would appear on the website.
Would it show what the complaint was?
Does not appear so, no.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the only thing, I don't mind the concept here. I just don't like people being open to the public on an alleged complaint that may be unfounded and it goes away, but it's still out there in the public that a company or a person, I guess this is a company at this point. And if it's, once you get information out on the internet, it's out there. And so I understand with violations, but when we're talking about alleged violations, I think that's a different standard that I'm concerned. I just want to make sure that there's no way the public can get that information.
Yeah, I think as I read this, it does two things. It has the identification number or violation number, so the person who filed it can track what's happened, if it's been followed up or closed. And at the same time, it has more general, whether it's air, water, or land, in the whatever department within the MDE, a complaint was filed. And I assume it's going to have a general phrase of what the violation was, I assume. But I think it's to have a 15,000 or 20,000 foot view for people who see there have been 50 violations on air violations and none have been closed. I think.
So is the intent here, trying to read into what they're doing, I would imagine if I put a complaint in and they gave me a case number, I could call back and say, here's my case number, what's the status, and the department could answer that. This appears, and maybe I'm wrong, but it appears that a third party can then monitor by case number. That wasn't the one who implemented or requested the complaint. Does anybody know if that's what they're trying to achieve through this? Because I think the individual could, I imagine they could already call in and find the status of their complaint. But, I mean, that's just a question.
I don't know specifically what the intent is, but I mean, yes, this would make all of that information public so that anybody could sort of follow the status of a complaint.
Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Senator Simonaire and I were totally doing the Vulcan mind meld here because that was exactly the area that I had flagged. So I am a huge proponent of transparency, and I think transparency in government, it makes everyone more accountable. I think it makes everything work better, and taxpayer money gets spent more wisely and all that. But I agree with the concept that Senator Simonaire was talking about, which is these are allegations, and that once they're up there. So one of the things that I was looking at is on page 94 in our packets, page 2 of 8 in the reprint, lines 18 and 19, it says maintain an update on at least a quarterly basis, and that's the list of the violations and complaints and all that. And then at the top of page 95, or page 3 of 8, it says you're going to update online at least on a monthly basis. So your list is on a quarterly basis, but you're updating on a monthly basis. So that, first off, seems a little bit odd. I'm also interested in even the frequent references to zip code, the county, and if readily available, the zip code in which the inspection occurred. So first off, zip codes, especially if they're 9-digit zip codes, can practically get to your house. So if there's supposed to be anonymity and some plausible deniability, but just there is an investigation going on, I'm wondering about, again, I like transparency, but I'm just wondering, and zip codes readily available, I can put any address I want into Google Maps without a zip code, and it gives me the zip code. So I'm not sure why the readily available language. So I know I've asked like 10 different questions in that, but April, if you're able to help us with any of that, that'd be great.
No, on the why the quarterly basis versus the monthly basis, I don't know the answer to that. So you're confusing sections here. So the subsection E includes like a number of lists that they have to do. One is so paragraph 1, so that's lines 11 through 18. That's the list of the complaints that they've received, and that's the anonymous data. Paragraph 2 is a list of inspections that have occurred, and that does include the name of the regulated entity. And that's the part that requires the zip code. The complaints does not include a zip code. It's just by county. But the next part is inspections and the results of inspections. That's paragraph 2. That includes the name of the regulated entity. It includes inspection identification number, zip code, whether the site is in compliance or whether any additional investigation is necessary, status of the inspection, and the media basis for the inspection. So it's a different requirement. So that right now is subject to PIA. You can get the inspection reports for regulated entities.
Can you please just list regulated entities, what that might include in this circumstance?
So this is anybody that's... So this would be anybody that's subject to an inspection under those listed programs in the, so the water quality programs administered by the Department of the Water and Science Administration, the water quality programs administered by the Land and Materials Administration, air quality programs administered by the Departments of Air and Radiation Administration. So any program where they're doing inspections as part of the program.
But it looks like on page 7 of 8 of the bill, page 99 of the packet, it can also be like a crabber or an oyster person or a boater.
So that's a separate part. So starting on page 5 at the very bottom, we cut to the Department of Natural Resources. So that's a different part of the bill. That's what the Department of Natural Resources is required to report. And the reporting requirements for them are much more general and broader. All they have to do is do this annual report under subsection A that then I think has to be posted to the website. And it's a lot of total numbers of things.
Senator Patterson.
I don't know, I was just reading through. I'm not sure if I had a complaint that I would want to file it under this agreement. It seemed like there's no protection built in for the complainant here. I mean, it's just a lot of information. I was always under the impression that if anything, you would make an extra step to ensure that a complainant information is highly secured and confidential. I don't understand why we put it out so much here. Because, I mean, you got to think about retaliation. If I'm in a unit, my supervisor, I may not be at the point I want my supervisor to know all this.
Right. I mean, all I will say is that there's nothing in here that would put the name or the source of a complaint.
Yeah, but if you're working in the same unit, you building, you can put 2 and 2 together and figure out where it might be coming from. I've been in that situation, I know.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I agree on some of the concerns being raised, but I have a question about enforcement actions. So that's also part of the bill, is that there'll be enforcement actions. Are enforcement actions, in other words, things that have already been issued, they've been litigated, an amount has been assessed, are those available on the website? Or is this bill creating that?
Through a PIA, this would make it available on a website.
Right. So, so those, I was going through, and I think we all got this email, maybe, I know I got it, where they're giving some examples of other states that provide provide this information, and it looks like everyone at least does all the enforcement actions. So that part of the bill, I'm wondering, I just wanted to assert that one, we're not providing, so enforcement actions, and I guess also I'm trying to see if we have consensus on that enforcement actions have already happened, right, Chair and Vice Chair? And so this would be a way of transparency, of tracking to see, okay, they've made these assessments, it's asking for penalties, what orders, the cases referred for prosecution, all this is data. So this is not someone accused of something, this is actually something that's been researched and they've been found guilty. That's correct?
Different parts of the bill. Some part of the bill is the allegation where it doesn't name the party, but it will say whether it was air or water, and whether it's been investigated or not, or the investigation is complete. So that's, I think both are true, but they're separate.
Yeah. So I guess I'm expressing and just trying to work through that this part, at least for me, is less problematic. This part of the bill where it's listing enforcement actions that have been initiated and, over the last year, that there's less problematic. I have less problem with individuals' information being divulged for that. I haven't decided about the other issues, but I just wanted to see what others thought about that part of the bill.
After Senator Carrozza, I'm going to speak to that, Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So listening to this discussion, which is a very important one, I've tried to break the issues down, and I think maybe that's where my colleague, Senator Washington, was trying to break it down into the violations, which you want the department to track, and the pieces that go more along on, I guess, page 94 or page 2 of the reprint. And so you have the violations part, and then you have the transparency and the posting of alleged violations on the website. And I want to associate my remarks and concerns with several of my colleagues, the Vice Chair, Senator Simonaire, and others. I mean, I think that, again, these are alleged violations, and once this is on the website, it's out there. And I have a concern about privacy and protecting those who might have been an alleged violation. And, some of my poultry farm families, they already have, no trespassing signs up and everything else. There have been security concerns. So I really think maybe this committee needs to think through, what are we trying to accomplish with this legislation? What the department has to do with the violations, and then what do we need to do as far as transparency, but still provide the appropriate privacy and protection for our constituents. So I don't know if that's an amendment or where we might be going with that, but I do think there's some merit to breaking this down and working on these issues.
Well, let me speak, and if you want that to be a hold, has this still been held? So if you would like that hold, we can do it. Let me come back to Senator Washington's question. I mean, I was given a report of MDE's enforcement actions. I don't remember if it was 18 to 20 or 17 to 19. They fell by 40%. And I have heard anecdotally about the lack of enforcement in a number of agencies. And that concerns me, because it affects the public health, the public welfare, the environment, et cetera. So if I knew there were 20 complaints around air emissions or water or land, and I saw that 2/3 of them weren't even investigated, I'd be pretty, bless you, ticked off. And I shouldn't have to go through a PIA to find that information. So, I err on the side that we need to ensure that enforcement's taking place. I think in some of the budget cuts in some of the agencies, the enforcement divisions have been cut. And I think it does a disservice to the people of the state. And I'd like to know that. It took me a long time to even find a 30,000 view, and it's a simple chart that says there were 200 enforcements on this and then 100, but it was so aggregated opposed to being disaggregated. Even that didn't tell me a lot. So I'm very sympathetic to this bill. I mean, maybe it needs some fine-tuning and changes, but we shouldn't have to go through a PIA to find out if the agencies are doing their jobs. So, again, that's not to say it's in perfect shape, and already the sponsor has come up with some amendments. But I have to tell you, I'm inclined to support it. Although if there's some amendments, then we can do a hold till either Friday or early next week. But I'm going to call on Senator Fry Hester and then Washington, and let's just make a decision after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to offer up that I did have the chance to talk to the bill's sponsor or communicate with the bill's sponsor between last night and this morning. And she mentioned that she'd worked really hard with the various people who had come in and she said both that the Maryland Association of Builders had dropped their opposition, MDE had no longer opposition, and Ms. Casemeyer with the Maryland Delaware Solid Waste Association now has no opposition. So I think she's done a lot of work in the past week to eliminate that, just for what it's worth.
That's very helpful, Senator. Thank you for sharing that. Senator Washington, to you.
Same here as well. It's very helpful, and I'm not going to propose any amendments. It sounds like we can vote the bill, but I think you're trying to find out the denominator, Chairman. Is that the idea? It's like we want to know what's the universe of allegations, right? And so the universe of allegations, is there a way for that to happen where it can be tracked, where there's not the identifiable information? So I think that's just the concern. That's I just wanted to understand that. We're trying to get to the bottom line.
Chair, and I feel a little better about this now that I've heard some of the recent comments, but I just 100% want to make sure we have this right and kind of the trust but verify thing. So, I mean, I would like to officially request that hold just so I can just make 100% sure that this thing's right.
That's fine. It may be on the list on Friday morning, just so let's get our facts right. And I don't know if I shared it in the first week of session. We're doing the one hold per bill now, but when things get a little tighter and crossover, we're going to have to move a lot more quickly, and that is not a lifetime hold, given the conditions of the legislature, and that's for anybody's bill. I mean, I think you can kill lots of bills that way. So we're doing it now, and I'm going to keep holding to it, one per bill. But like the week before crossover, we're going to have to be rocking and rolling a little bit. So this bill's held till the next voting session. Next bill.
Senate Bill 375, Senator Kagan, Agriculture, Neonicotinoid Pesticide Sale and Storage. This bill establishes that a neonic pesticide may only be sold at retail to a certified applicator as currently defined or a farmer. The bill also requires a retailer to store neonics in a manner that is inaccessible to customers without assistance. There is an amendment on page 101 of the voting packet from Senator Kagan. This is amendment number 933621/1. The amendment removes language that would have required neonic pesticides to be kept behind the counter.
Let's put the bill before us. Is there a motion? It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second on the bill? It's been seconded. You want to speak? Please.
Just to The amendment has my name on it. Just to remind folks, it was requested by the Retailers Association. It was not ideological or any particular issues with the bill. It was just to clarify that not all retail establishments have counters. And so behind the counter, literally, may not be feasible everywhere. And so it's really a clarifying precision amendment. So I'd like to move the amendment for the retailers.
Yeah, and that's the second, Senator. Yeah, and I just looked back at the file. There was no opposition, and there was only one favorable with amendment, and that was the retailers. Okay, any objection to the amendment that was just proffered? Seeing none, no objection, that's adopted. The bill as amended is before you. Further discussion? Seeing none, will anybody want to vote against it where we need a roll call? Then the bill is adopted unanimously and taken to the floor. Next.
Senate Bill 415, Public Financing Act, Matching Fund Revisions, the Maryland Fair Elections Act. This bill modifies the Public Financing Act by, 1, modifying the qualifying requirements by establishing the types of eligible contributions. It establishes new qualifying requirements, including raising $1,500 eligible private contributions with an aggregate total of $120,000 during the qualifying period, and providing new matching contribution numbers. It mandates appropriations to the Fair Campaign Financing Fund of $4 million in fiscal 2023 and an amount sufficient to fully fund specified numbers of gubernatorial tickets under the Act in future elections, and authorizes the State Board of Elections to impose civil penalties of up to $1,000 for knowing violations of this act. There is one amendment from Senator Pinsky, and it's a standalone. It wasn't in the packet. I put it on everyone's desk. And this amendment would revise the matching dollars, which were previously 9, 5, 2, and 0, to be 8, 6, 2, and 0.
Okay, let's put it on the floor first. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had public financing for governor on the books for a number of years. As we said, candidate Sauerbrey, candidate Hogan, candidate Madalino. I'm sorry? Heather Mazier. We've had at least four, and actually those four, 2 are Democrats, 2 are Republicans. The money is light at the moment, not enough to host public finance candidates. I've heard from Budget and Tax they're willing to put the money in. So it continues the program. And whereas the original match was done with a broad brush, this is a little more fine-tuned from other experience that's happened around the state. And again, it's been brought to my attention that the 9 times for the first match, or $9 for the first dollar, is probably high, and it was suggested to me that we drop that to 8 and do the next level at 6 times instead of 5. And again, it was Senator Ellis who pointed out the fiscal note was probably not described the most clearly and accurately. So I would move from 9 to 5 to 8 and 6. Any objection? Okay, the bill is amended. Discussion. Seeing none and no objection, that will be recorded as unanimous and sent to. Okay. Senator Gallion. Okay, I see Senator Gallion and Senator Carrozza voting against the gubernatorial public financing. Anybody else? Okay, then it'll be recorded as 9-2. You have that noted, Lemoria? Okay. Next bill.
Senate Bill 418, Senator Pinsky, Maryland Energy Administration Energy and Water Efficiency Standards alterations. This bill replaces existing energy efficiency standard requirements for various products with energy and water efficiency standard authorizations and requirements for a new list of products, authorizing the Maryland Energy Administration to adopt standards for certain products and requiring specified standards to be adopted for other products. The bill also creates a contingency for any future repeal or other voiding other than by a court of competent jurisdiction of a federal product efficiency standard by establishing that in that circumstance, the previously applicable federal standard becomes the minimum efficiency standard in the state. There are amendments on page 102 of the voting packet being offered by Senator Pinsky, but these were the amendments that were requested by the Maryland Energy Administration. Amendment number 1 makes clarifying changes to the definition of shower head. Amendment number 2 alters the definition of water closet to include dual flush toilets and establishes water efficiency standards for dual flush toilets. Amendment number 3 clarifies that the bill only applies to the installation of appliances if the installation is done for profit. Amendment number 4 adds efficiency standards for portable electric spas and removes noise level requirements for ventilating fans. Amendment number 5 strikes language aimed at mitigating the federal rollbacks on efficiency standards.
Is there a motion favorable on the bill? It's been moved, it's been seconded. Ladies and gentlemen, these amendments came from MEA, Maryland Energy Administration, and I was fine with them. I would encourage people to adopt them. So, any objection to the MEA amendments? Seeing none, they're adopted. The bill as amended. Senator? Oh, discussion. Senator Carozza.
So I'm just trying to catch up on, I know, Mr. Chair, you said that these were amendments from MEA. I saw that there was, I didn't know if any of those amendments addressed some of the concerns that were raised by the Maryland Building Industry Association, and I think there was the Appliance Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. So I haven't been able to cross-check that amendment with their concerns, if you were aware that if they addressed them or not.
I don't, Senator, but in this case, I'm siding with the administration. That doesn't happen that frequently. And in fact, while it was not an administration bill, some of this bill was suggested by those in the administration. So I can only tell you it's got the support of the administration. It might not be the builders, but we can't please everyone. It calls for, like Energy Star and refrigerators and things like that. It adds fluorescent lamps, portable electric spas, faucets, urinals, water closets, water coolers. My guess is they're concerned it's going to increase the price of a house. My view is if they're more energy efficient, people are going to save money, and MEA agrees with it, so I'm with MEA.
So the MEA amendments came in after you introduced the bill, and after the hearing?
No, they're in the testimony.
What's that? Okay, that was part of their testimony?
Yes. Senator Freihester.
Yeah, I'm so sorry not to pay more attention to this bill earlier. As you know, I'm all for energy efficiency, but one thing that caught my eye was in the piece of testimony from AHAM, and they mentioned that the availability of air cleaners and purifiers in Maryland, that this bill would restrict approximately 60% of the air cleaners from the shelves. Did you talk to them at all?
I have from which group?
AHAM, which is the the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. They make a good point about air cleaners and purifiers, and if...
No, I didn't speak with them. I don't know if MEA did. I don't know if the AHAM represents all the companies or not. I don't know if it was for the good of the industry or for their members. I just don't know. We'll go to Senator Simon Ayer. We can come back to you, Senator Frey-Hester.
So as far as the bill rollout, so it's going to go to the department. They're going to come up with the efficiency standards and then put them in. And then is there going to be a cooling off period where they can get the things off the shelf and sell them? And then at a certain point, then the new efficient ones come in, or how do they deal with product that they've already bought in stores?
The bill specifies that the MEA has to adopt the regulations by January 1st, 2022, and then products would not be allowed to be sold or offered for sale beginning October 1st, 2023. Now, it would not apply to a product that was sold before the regulations were adopted. But yeah, so regulations would go into effect January 1st, 2022, and then October 1st, 2023 would be the prohibition on sale.
Madam Counsel, on that same page, what is the October 1, 2024 date referred to on line 18?
So that would be, so that's the, to give people who have already purchased products for installation, it gives them another year to install those products. And then the amendments further take it down to say that's installing for profit. So a home consumer would bought a product a while back and install it whenever. But after October 1st, 2024, you would not be able to charge to install one of these products that doesn't meet the efficiency standards.
Okay, and then so the department would go through some process to determine what the appropriate efficiency, that's for the department to determine, not laid out in this.
Right. There are some national groups that set standards. And what happened actually 6 or 8 years ago is Maryland and some other states adopted some standards for certain products, and soon after the federal government adopted the same standards. So, I mean, this is being discussed and maybe even adopted in numbers of states around the country.
And the bill does lay out some baseline standards for these products. So if you look on pages 9 through 11 of the bill, it does have some particular specific efficiency standards for different products in there already.
Standards come from. So are they setting the floor, basically, what the department can set? And so where'd you get those numbers?
I either got it from MEA or the national group that sets standards, but MEA endorsed those numbers. I can't tell you. So, Senator Frey-Hester?
Yes. Once again, my apologies. I'm getting some information that Hawaii has similar legislation, and they amended out air purifiers for this reason. I don't know if we could do a conceptual amendment, just given what's going on with the need for people to purchase air purifiers at this point in time. Or we could hold it, and I could try to draft an amendment.
Okay, we'll hold it. We'll check also with MEA and see whether it's what AHAM asserts is actually true.
That would be great.
It may or may not be true. You can prepare an amendment.
Okay.
Let's do a little homework, and we'll find out if there's any objective reality, in terms of, I noticed the one on the floor of the Senate, the portable air purifiers. I don't remember what brand it was, and I don't know if they would make it. I know
exactly.
Baltimore City Schools have been buying up lots of them in terms of preparing their schools. So let's do a little homework on this.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Senate Bill 427, Public Schools, Provision of Menstrual Hygiene Products Requirement. This bill requires each local board of education to ensure that each public school provide, at no charge to students, menstrual hygiene products via dispensers in the restrooms at the school. A public middle or high school must install menstrual hygiene product dispensers in at least 2 restrooms on or before October 1, 2021, and on or before October 1, 2025, if divided by gender, all women's and 1 men's room. If not divided by gender, all restrooms. A public elementary school must install menstrual hygiene product dispensers in at least 1 restroom on or before October 1, 2021. There is one amendment. It is on page 103 of your voting packet. This is from Senator Pinsky, and this amendment would require each county board to ensure that each public middle and high school provide these products to students. It revises the requirement to only require the installation of dispensers with products in all women's rooms on or before October 1, 2025, thus removing the men's room requirement, and requires a public school nurse or a school nurse in a public elementary school to make products available free of charge to students on or before October 1, 2021, and removes the requirement about the installation of the dispensers in the elementary schools. There was no opposition at the hearing.
Okay. Is there a motion on the bill? Huh? No, on the bill. Let's get it on the floor. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Ladies and gentlemen, look, I was convinced by the testimony, but I thought there were a few things that were probably not necessary or appropriate, and it added the cost to the bill. So I took out elementary school, but said nurses should have them available. And adding them to men's room, I guess with a belief in transgender, some people would want them in the men's room. I didn't see there was as great a need for that. So that's why I put in the amendments. And I would say this, is there a motion on the amendments? It's moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendments. Any objection to the amendments? Okay, the bill as amended. And before I leave this thought, ladies and gentlemen, you listen to the same testimony that I do. And if the bill looks good or doesn't look good, or it looks good but you don't like some section of it, please make a note, either electronically or on paper, and call for an amendment. I mean, I've reviewed these, and I have the council nearby, near my office, and so I've offered some amendments to try to clean this up. But it's all of our responsibility. So if you see something that needs to be pared down, do not hesitate to either call committee council or call across the street and say, it's all fair. I mean, you have an idea for an amendment, don't hesitate to do it. And I don't want it to fall just on me. I'd love to have the amendments come from other people, not just me, because I don't want to feel the pressure, to tell you the truth. So that is an open invitation to, proffer amendments on any of the bills before us. Okay, the bill is amended before us. Debate, discussion. Senator.
I have 2 small amendments, if I could. I think one's just clarifying on page 2. Line 4, after the word "to," if we could put women's. I think that gets the intention of your previous amendment. On page 2,
right,
line 4, add women's between 2 and restrooms. That way I would say at least 2 women's restrooms to be consistent with line 9, because there's one in 2021, the one you amended was 2025. So it just clarifies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Accepted. Okay. And the second one, and I brought this up in the hearing, I think, we have these great ideas at the state. We should have the state fund it instead of putting all these unfunded mandates onto the counties. And, I love the sponsor, and she had a bill on the floor today that was putting over $3 million to the arts grant. So I would amend it that we at the state pay for this, And I went through the fiscal note and all the numbers, and as far as when the installation and when the supplies, and it would be FY '22 to '23, it would be $1 million each. FY '24 would be 1.5 million, and FY '25 going forward would be 1 million. Basically, the cost of the program. So again, great idea, but if you don't have the money for it, why throw it down onto the counties when they don't have the money?
Senator Frye-Hester.
Question on the proposed amendment. How much do we pay for toilet paper? And you just said we paid 1 million, we could pay 1 million for the menstrual products, but how much do we pay for toilet paper?
No, the fact of the matter is the toilet paper or whatever is already paid for. It's in the budget, whether the county or the state, I don't know who pays for what, but that's already paid for. We as a state are proposing to increase spending at the school for a very good project. But I find it interesting that we say this is a great idea, let's impose it on the counties and you guys pay for it. I mean, if we're coming up with the idea, we think it's good, I think we should pay for it at the state.
First, let's put it in front of us. We can discuss it, vote it up or down. It's been moved and seconded just to get it on the floor. So the question is shifting it from the local paying to the state. That's what's before us. Yes, Senator.
On the amendment. Again, part of this, it's not a project. It is something that's needed as much as toilet paper. PPE wasn't something, now those are budgets. They are getting some money, but that is going to become part of the ongoing expense. In future fiscal years, this will be added to budgets. There is time for them to accommodate those. Again, I understand what you're saying, and I look forward to you voting for increased funding for public education going forward, but this is not a special project. This is an omission. This is a needed supply that is often should be provided by the locals. So, thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Senator.
As a dad of 4 daughters who at some point are going to need these products, hopefully a long way off because they're young and they're getting too old too quick, but I was glad to hear in the hearing that these products are already available at the nurses station. So I guess the main thing is here is there like an embarrassment to go into the nursing station? I mean, the products are already available. So is that a huge issue? And I don't know this. I'm asking this honestly, that folks are so embarrassed to go into their nurse. I don't know. I just take your word for that.
So any question is appropriate. Senator Frye-Hester and Senator Carrozza.
Senator Gallion, that's a great question, and since you asked it, I will answer it. You might not find out until you get to the bathroom that you are in need of a feminine product. And then to make it from the bathroom to the nursing station could potentially risk the clothing that you are wearing. So yes, I would say I would be embarrassed.
No, I had Senator Carrozza next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to my colleagues, I'm speaking in support of the amendment on the floor, which is to have the state pick up the cost of the installation of this, because that is the project part of it. So that is something new for the counties and the locals. So for that, from that standpoint, the installation would be, those costs should be covered by the state. So I did differentiate between the installation and the ongoing expense, but that those installation costs definitely should be picked up by the state. So I will be voting in support of the amendment.
Yeah, and thank you. I don't think anybody's debating the need for it. It's just the counties did not come asking for this. They didn't say, we've got the money in our budgets, let's do it. It was a state senator who said, this is a good idea that we should mandate it on the counties. Each of us have counties, each of us have their budgets and all that. And I'm sure they appreciate our input. But, you know, we're always talking about the Board of Education. They don't like mandates, and we fight really hard. Let's not do it. Well, this is an unfounded mandate. And I think the responsibility comes to us if we're mandating it down to the counties to say, this is a good idea, but we're not going to give you any money. It's like telling my kids, I want you to do this, and you're responsible for it, but I'm not giving you any money for it. You go figure out how to get the money. So I think it's a reasonable amendment, and we can vote it up or down.
Very, very briefly, you know, I toyed with the idea of whether it should be split, you know, everyone having buy-in in this. But I went back, and I have to tell you, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education and Superintendents didn't testify. They didn't oppose it, which sort of sends a message to me that they probably can live with it. And $1 million over 24 jurisdictions, you know, if it's $40,000 on average, but in Montgomery County, if they have to spend $100,000 and at Dorchester $15,000 in their budget, it's really not a big item. It just really isn't. So while I thought about splitting it, when I saw the lack of opposition, I think I'm just going to support what's in the bill. So, okay, let's do a roll call. The amendment is to shift it from the local LEAs to the state. Oh, please.
Senator Simonaire, are we voting on, you said you had two parts of your amendment, and then Senator Croza, a little bit, I got confused. So Senator Simonaire, page 2, line 2, no, page 2, line 4, you wanted to put in women's, right? Is that part of what we're voting on right now? Okay, so then the second part, Senator Croza talked about installation. You were talking about, I thought, all cost of installing the product dispensers as well as the products. Am I wrong?
The note talked about the installation cost and then the ongoing cost. And I incorporated both of them into the cost.
Both. Senator Croza talked about just installation.
Okay, well
Okay,
then.
so what's on the floor right now, Mr. Chairman, is both?
No. Normally, the way this works in Robert's rules, the amendment to the amendment, it would be Senator Carrozza's amendment to the amendment, which says it should be for the dispensers and not for the product and the dispensers. I understand. And her amendment is to narrow it.
Was that an amendment?
No, he didn't accept it. I mean,
I don't think she formally. Whether that was an amendment, a formal amendment, and then maybe Senator Simonaire can decide whether that's friendly or we can vote on it.
Well, it wasn't a formal amendment. I'm supporting Senator Simonaire's amendment, but I also do distinguish between those costs.
do you want the cost just be for the dispensers, or do you want it to be for all? If so, you can amend a colleague's amendment.
Somebody would vote differently if we amended it? Okay, so I would amend it to just the installation.
He has accepted your friendly amendment.
That you didn't make.
Right, okay. So the Simon-Air Carrozza amendment on the floor is that the state should pick up the cost for the machines, for the dispensers. One-time cost. Discussion on the amendment.
I'm going to support this amendment because I think the installation can be seen as a capital expenditure, and the state does pay for capital expenditures in our schools. And so the device dispenser will be put up there once. I think if we even make it narrower and just say, shall install like one time. So if kids destroy it, or it gets taken down, or moved, or during a renovation or something, the state shouldn't have to come back and move it to a different wall if they paint it, or it gets broken for some reason. But one-time initial installation as a capital investment, I think is totally fine for the state. I'll be voting yes.
Sir. So what would be the cost to the state with that breakout? And do we need to run this by the budget folks? Or?
Well, the fiscal note says about $500,000, about half the cost, as I read it. Okay. And normally, if we're going to move something over $100,000 or $200,000, they would like some notice to say whether they're going to find the money for it. That's true.
We hadn't checked in with B&T because this was a local cost. This was not a cost to the state. So when you make this amendment, before we would report it out, it would be advisable to consult B&T as to whether there was funding to make this a state mandate.
Look, there are a couple ways around this, Senator. We can not put on the amendment and put it on the floor if they say it's a go. That's one way of doing it. We can hold the bill. I would hate to put it on and then take it off. That's one thing I prefer not to do. So I'm open on the question. I mean, it's our bill. So I'm open to suggestions. Senator Washington.
Moving the bill, and then we can, by Friday, I would assume, would you be able to get some sense from by Friday if you wanted to put it on? I agree that if we don't want to put it on and then it's like, wah, wah, never mind, we can't do it. So it's getting late, sorry about that.
I believe I can. I can't promise, but I can.
Just let's see. So let's just vote it clean.
The chair.
Vote it with your amendments. It comes out, and then we prepare. That there'd be a committee amendment to address this other. I think Senator Ellis is right. If we're going to be, responsible in that way.
Madam Vice Chair, and then we'll decide if we have consensus.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would first suggest, rather than us going through all the acrobatics of this, why don't we see if the votes are there, hypothetically, like you sometimes do a straw vote, on the Simon Ayer amendment? Because if there aren't the votes, then it's irrelevant, then we can just vote the bill with your amendments. If there are the votes, then we could kind of keep that in our back pocket, because would we otherwise send this to the floor on Friday if it were ready to go? Yes. Okay. Well.
That's a fair point. So we'll do a straw vote in 1 second. But I have to ask you a question, and it may or may not be appropriate. This is a state expenditure, and I guess before we adopt this, I'd like to know if the minority leader is going to support this expenditure on the floor. I mean, I don't want to add it if the minority party is going to vote against it. And that may affect my vote.
Yeah, normally that would be a private conversation, but yes, I would support it.
Okay.
But he's not speaking for the delegate, for the caucus.
Right, definitely. I know I speak for me, it seems like a decent bill.
Senator Washington.
I'm a little worried. I don't want the committee to sort of ruin an otherwise good policy, not ruin, but delay or, an otherwise good policy. We could visit this, I believe, amending the money on it, but you raise a good point. We would be stepping outside of way outside of what the sponsor was asking for. And if we're just going to focus on the policy, our obligation is the policy part of it. And we could ask our other colleagues. And if the leader wants, he could offer that on the floor, and that would be a good signal. So I would say I'm inclined now. I was going to vote for it, but now I'm inclined. I'm not going to support the amendment out of concern that it could slow down the bill.
I think this committee should do its job. We have an amendment on the floor, and we should either vote it up or down. And this concern about the funding, number one, you might have members who vote against it because the cost is to the locals. You might have members who vote against it because it's split, and you might just have members vote against it, period. So I think for us to, oh, sorry. So my point would be, why doesn't this committee do its job? We have an amendment on the floor, take the vote, and not do the conjecture of how this person or that person might vote on the Senate floor.
The amendment is before you. It is the Simon Air Carrozza amendment, shifting the cost for the dispensers to the state. We'll do a roll call. I'm sorry, Madam Vice Chair.
Clarifying question, is this a straw vote or a real vote? The reason I ask, because another thing based on, I take Senator Croz's point, but one possibility is if the votes are there for the Simon Air Amendment, but we don't adopt it, we pass the bill with the Pinsky amendments and not the Simon Air amendments, but we know that the votes are there and the will is there. If we get the green light from Budget and Taxation Committee, then we know that we've already approved the Simon Air amendment, and on the floor it could say this is a friendly amendment from the committee.
Okay, this is how we're going to proceed. No, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to vote the amendment. If it passes, the committee is saying that it will be added as a committee amendment after we get approval from B&T. If this amendment dies, the bill moves as it is, and the sponsor introduced, well, not introduced it, but with the other amendments.
Is there any reason we don't vote the amendment, then hold the bill to get the B&T sign off? I'm not sure.
Well, let's take the vote first, and then we can decide to proceed. If it goes down, it becomes a non-issue. Roll call.
Fine. This is the Simon Air amendment to split the cost, to have the state pay for the installation of the dispensers, but the locals will pay for the products themselves. And it's a one-time use, one-time installation. I vote aye.
Clarify here, so the fiscal note makes a point. Installation costs are separate than the cost of the dispenser itself. So are you asking for a cost to pay for installation and dispensers, or just the dispensers themselves?
So the amendment's adopted. I think it's the will of the body to hold the amendment. Well, now we back to Ms. Morton. We can hold the bill and check, or we can add it from the floor. Is there any?
Procedurally, I don't know about adopting an amendment, reporting the bill to the floor without that amendment, and then adding the amendment separately.
That's why this was
a
vote.
Well, I think
which
committee amendments have frequently been added over the years from the floor. I mean, whether it comes from one and it represents the committee vote, we can do it however we want to do it.
Mr. Chairman, the reason, in my opinion, not to hold the bill, but to bring it to the floor is we have a lot of work product. We've held a lot of bills today. We will be holding yet another bill, and it seems like things are really going to be backed up when we're talking about bringing things to the full Senate. I would suggest that if it's the will of this committee, that we send this to the floor, and then whether it's a committee amendment or the Simon Air amendment or whatever, that just be added, assuming we get the green light from our budget friends.
Any objection with that strategy? Okay.
Process-wise, we do our work in the committee. We have between, either we can hold it and make sure we have the okay with B&T, given the sponsor of the bill is on that committee and the fact that we've worked through the issue. It seems to me we would be raising, we end up having a extended discussion of what we've just had in this committee on the floor when we're talking about moving stuff forward. So I just don't really understand why we wouldn't either, if we have a voting session on Friday in this committee, or if we just send it with the amendment because we've just voted on it.
Look, we will count the amendment as being formally adopted. We will hold the bill until we hear from B&T, and if they say we're not going to pay for it, then we have to strip it in committee on our next voting session. Any objection? Okay, that is what we will be doing. Oh, we have to vote on the bill as amended.
I would suggest you don't vote on the bill yet. We're not reporting the bill out, so hold it in its current form and then vote it on.
Okay. Committee Counsel Morton has suggested don't take the final vote until we get the word from B&T, and then we vote the bill or we strip the amendment. Okay, that's the posture we're leaving in. We will see it again on Friday.
It has your amendments on it?
It has both sets of amendments.
Yep. Okay, we're going to end soon. It's, I think the next two are very easy, and if they appear not to be easy, we'll stop. I don't want to keep us here in the meeting room too long. Friday, let me just jump there a minute. I had said 9:45, and my hope was till 10:45, or no, till 11:45. I was hoping to get 2 hours in. Apparently, there's a rules committee, which I was going to blow off. Well, don't tell anybody. But Senator Simon Ayer, minority leader, is also on that committee too, and he, I think, feels an obligation to be there. And that's at 10:30. So we've held a bunch of bills. I am going to suggest we meet at 9:30 to 10:25, and tentatively 11 to 11:45. And hopefully, if we do that, we might not even have to meet in the afternoon. So, yeah.
You don't have to hold it for me. I can just, as long as that doesn't change the outcome, you let me vote on the bills. I don't mind that.
Now I'm feeling guilty about not showing up.
I'm just putting that option out.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's keep it at 9:45 to 11:45. If I have to slip out for 5 minutes to present one bill, I'll just do it. It takes you a little longer to get to your office. And the vice chair can keep in, we still have 9 votes, and we'll do some of the easier bills, if there are any easier bills. So we'll keep it, we'll go 9:45 to 11:45 on Friday, but I still, if we can move either of these two bills without a lot of controversy, let's do it, and then we'll get out of here. 432.
Let's see here. Senate Bill 432, Public Libraries, Electronic Book Licenses, Access. This bill requires a publisher who offers to license an electronic book to the public to also offer to license the electronic book to public libraries in the state on reasonable terms that will enable public libraries to provide library users with access to the electronic book. Violation of this bill is considered an unfair, abusive, or deceptive trade practice under the Maryland Consumer Protection Act, subject to the Act's civil and criminal penalty provisions. There is one amendment. It's on page 104 of your voting packet, and it alters the definition of electronic book to include audiobooks. There was no opposition at the hearing.
It's been moved and seconded. Any objection to the amendment? Okay, the bill is amended. I mean, if people aren't ready, they aren't ready, but there was no opposition. And, St. Mary's Libraries and other people said it was fine and great. But I don't want to push it through. It's not my bill. Seeing no objection, we'll mark this as unanimous as amended for the floor. And let's try one more.
Senate Bill 436, Child Care Centers, Teacher Qualifications. This bill requires regulations adopted by the State Board of Education regarding the licensing and operation of child care centers to establish probationary employment qualifications for an individual who is applying for the first time to be a child care teacher in a child care center in the state that serves preschool or school-age children who are at least age 3. There are no amendments, and there was no opposition.
It's moved. It's been seconded. Discussion. Discussion. Seeing none. Yes, please, Senator.
This bill do now? Could you, council, go through that again? What does this bill do?
So this bill, what happens is, in order to increase the pool of available teachers, because there is a shortage, what it does is it requires the state board to amend their licensing and operation of child care centers to establish probationary employment qualifications. So it allows certain individuals who have certain credentials to begin teaching for a probationary period of 6 months. And then if they meet the requirements within that 6 months, they continue to be employed. If they don't, then they are essentially fired.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Further questions? Again, they're all welcome, so I don't want to jam. So if there are any other questions, seeing none, will anybody be objecting and voting against it? Then we will record it as unanimous. Stop. I don't want to keep us here too long. We want air filters to work the room. Look, ladies and gentlemen, the list could be updated. So now we have there are 6 left, and we've held 3. There could be additional. We'll send out a list tomorrow. So, I'm trying to move bills out of here so we don't catch hell that we're sitting on all these bills. So, there's still another 80 or 90 that we haven't voted on that we've heard. So we're doing the best we can. Just look for another list tomorrow before 5 o'clock. And if not, we'll see you at 9:45 on Friday, although we'll see you tomorrow for committee hearings. And is there a subcommittee meeting? You've got one? 4:30 or thereabouts after. Okay. Environmental subcommittee will meet. Senator Hester, when is yours scheduled? Monday, 3:30 to 5. Okay. Thursday after voting. We got 2. When's Thursday? Thursday we're not voting. Okay. So the cyber group is meeting Monday and possibly Thursday. Okay. Thank you.
It's tentatively at 4:30, but it's going to be sometime after. Yeah, the environment subcommittee. Sometime after hearing, so just stay tuned.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.